Well, hi everybody, it's Bill Whittle in the Stratosphere Lounge here, back again for yet another exciting episode on a Wednesday night because we have nothing better to do. It is, I think it's 72. I think the last one I called 72, but it was actually 71. This one's 72. This is the post-Lyda Loudon apology Stratosphere Lounge. Just joking with her about that earlier tonight. How's everybody doing out there? I hope you're having a great week, and it's good to be here. We got some great questions as usual. Been a very, very busy week for me again. We've got to the place now where we're trying to make sure that I can just maintain this output. We basically tripled my long format output, and I wanted to, it's taken a couple weeks just to sort of get in the groove with that, and we really just have to, get to a place where everything's kind of regular. Since we've been doing the Truth Revolt firewalls, we've had a couple of different lighting setups, which means that all of the presets on the videos are different, and it's been keeping me up pretty late and kind of preventing me from getting a lot of rest. But I think we're starting to get this thing down to where it's starting to get a bit into a groove. I just did one that I put up last night at midnight, and it's a Lost in Space episode, which I like very, very much. I'll have that up on the Facebook page tomorrow. So that's kind of fun. It's not I don't think it's the match of the Star Trek Afterburner, but Lost in Space isn't the match for Star Trek anyway. Nevertheless, it was really fun, and I really had a good time doing it. I'm a little distracted today by other things, to be perfectly honest with you, so if I seem a little out of it, that's because I'm a little out of it. But we are actually getting to the place where the lease negotiations, which I thought I was going to sign 2 weeks ago, looks like it's finally done, and hopefully be in the new offices by the 15th, maybe, of June. And then we can kind of hopefully settle down and get into something a little more regular. So that would be cool. Anyway, it's Wednesday night, and we've got, once again, the highest ranking questions on the Stratosphere Lounge kind of thing. So everything else is looking pretty good. Haven't had any major technical problems so far. I'm sure we'll find a way to remedy that as the course of the evening goes on. So why don't we get started here and see what we can do with episode 72. 1, 2... Looks like it's a 4 episode tonight, including the top 3. That's trifecta. It is pretty remarkable, really. I know we joke about this a lot, but honestly, it's absolutely kind of amazing. So, make sure I get the pages right. Yep. Here we go. No, not the top 3, the bottom 3 or 4 or whatever. Okay, so episode 72, and we'll get going on the show. So we have this first question coming to us from Sarah Belchak, and she writes, in the upcoming 2016 presidential elections, presidential candidate Bill Whittle is in debate with presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. How does candidate Whittle demonstrate conservative ideals and goals in a way that resonates with the audience? Basically, how does candidate Whittle avoid or answer the personal attacks that the left is so fond of using and get conservatism across to the audience? Well, I think what we probably would do to start off there would be to say that I think if you're going to get in this fight, you have to own these ideas, and you can't run away from them, and you can't run away from them because of what they're going to say about you. I really think that's the most important thing. And that means you have to be ammoed up. What ammoed up means, if you're prepared for charges of racism, which are going to come your way no matter what you say, then you really have to understand the background of the racial history of this country. And we're not going to get into this now because I think I covered it just an episode or 2 ago. Yeah, maybe this sounds a little distorted, a little loud. Sorry about that. Let me take that down a little bit. For example, you need to know about the great debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, and how the Democrats have basically sided with half of the argument that completely, unmans Black America. It just reduces them to basically voting slavery. There's what I was looking for. Just trying to make an adjustment to the lights, and they go right on out. So I think what we really have to start off with by doing is we have to understand that we got to be ammoed up, and we got to be ready to deal with these charges that are going to be coming out of us. So, yeah, everybody's saying, boy, the mic is too loud. Let me see if I can get this gain down. It's a two-part thing here. Hang on a minute. Let's try that. Hang on. Okay, it's got like a gain and then a volume. Hopefully that's a little bit better. I had it kind of cranked from last week because we had Lyda here and we didn't get too close to the microphone, so hopefully that's a little bit better. Anyway, the thing you have to, as I say, you have to be prepared to do is to own these ideas. So you got to be prepared for the racism argument. You got to be prepared for the misogyny argument. You got to be prepared for all of it. And I think, frankly, to start with your question, Sarah, the real thing you got to be able to do is you've got to be able to get on the offense and not be afraid to do that. The exit polling for the last election showed that Mitt Romney, exit polling, won everything. He won every single thing. He won on the economy, he won on defense, he won on everything. But he was vilified and demonized, and and you can't undemonize yourself. So the reason they didn't vote for him was because he was Darth Vader. He was the villain. So I think what we really have to do is we have to just sort of get to a place where you understand that you're going to be demonized, so you have to fight back. And that means that really you're going to have to give people a choice between the villain with the good ideas or the villain with the bad ideas, because they will make it personal about you. Mitt Romney was a guy who gave his employees cancer and had binders full of women and all this other stuff. And, if you're not prepared to fight back on that, then you're probably in the wrong line of work. I think in terms of with Hillary, you probably have to go right to this whole thing about her incompetence and her sense of entitlement. And I would go right to the dynasty thing, and I would go right to the whole just hit her right where she lives, that her record is not good, and that for somebody who's talking about women and women's opportunities, it's a little ironic that the only reason we've heard of Hillary Clinton was because of who she married. There's a lot of women out there who are self-made individuals, or people who've gone out there and basically done their own thing. And most of those people, a lot of them anyway, are Republicans because they're self-made women entrepreneurs. It's kind of ironic that Hillary married into her position of power. So this is what I'm talking about by going on offense. I don't think she's ready for that. And I think also you basically have to have a little bit of sense of humor and a little bit of looseness. And finally, honestly, Sarah, I think what you ultimately have to do is have a certain sort of self-deprecating manner. As far as the personal attacks go, I think you really just have to roll with them the way that Ronald Reagan ran with the old age issue. You just can't stand against that kind of tide. You have to surf it. You have to kind of surf that wave. But mostly you just have to believe in what you believe in and not be afraid to stand up for it. So I'm trying to think of an example of how that would look. But, they're so used to just launching these attacks from their moral high ground, and I just say, just don't give them the moral high ground. Just don't allow them to have it. And frankly, to conclude, Sarah, I would say not only not allow them to have it, but just say so. Just say so. I'm not going to let you take the moral high ground on this, Mrs. Clinton, because frankly, you don't have any ground to stand on. You're not in a position to talk about my lack of experience as commander-in-chief. We've seen what you did when you were in command, and you ran away from people who requested help, and then you tried to duck responsibility, and the second that you knew it was a terrorist attack in Benghazi, you went out and lied to the American people and Congress, called it a movie, blamed it on a movie, blamed it on our First Amendment rights, which even if that had been the case of the riots in Benghazi, even if that had been true, you knew it wasn't true the instant you said it. But even if it had been true, you're going to take the side of rioters in Benghazi over our First Amendment freedoms to speak our mind in America? Do you actually think that's the kind of person we want defending our freedoms here in this country? Because I put the First Amendment above everything else. That's why it's the First Amendment. So if your position is going to be that these people, this Benghazi attack happened because of a movie, and therefore we got to stop making movies and we're going to have that man arrested, you're more of a Nazi really than incompetent. That's just fascism. No, that's not how it works here. You knew it was a terrorist attack. You lied to the American people to cover your ass. And not only did you do that, but you did that in such a way that sold out our fundamental principles. That was your first instinct, was to sell them out. I think people in America ought to be able to say what they want to say, hear what they want to hear, do what they want to do, and live how they want to live, without the government threatening to arrest them to cover their own incompetence and failure. That's my personal opinion. That's how I would deal with Hillary Clinton. Just do that. Because you will not win if you allow them to choose the battlefield. And we've been over this again and again and again. So that's my answer there, Sarah. Chris Taylor says C.S. Lewis wrote that the ideal of chivalry was the combination of two things that naturally did not go together. Someone who is meek, i.e. gentle and modest in society, and yet bold in war. Quote, it taught humility and forbearance to the great warrior because everyone knew by experience how much he usually needed that lesson. It demanded valor of the urbane and modest man because everyone knew that he was as likely as not to be a milksop. Speaking about chivalry here. So let me just deal with that for a second because there's more to the question, but it's a profound thing. I wish I'd read this. I'll be looking for it. C.S. Lewis, genius, obviously, a moral genius. What C.S. Lewis is saying here, and this is new to me, I'd never read it. In fact, I'd never read it until just a second because I was so late, as usual, getting in here, cutting and pasting the questions. But think about what Lewis is saying here. Think about the genius, again, the moral genius of C.S. Lewis. He's saying that chivalry basically does two things. He says that it basically civilizes the warrior and at the same time encourages, in the true sense of the word, adds courage to the meek. Chivalry taught humility and forbearance to the great warrior because everyone knew by experience how much he usually needed that lesson. In other words, great warriors are used to obtaining things by force, and without chivalry, they become the kind of arrogant tyrants that we've always known them to be. The idea of a moral code that was above that valued humility and valued humility was a tremendous thing to have, because what you find in warrior societies is that their moral code is so advanced. Whatever the code is, warriors have to have codes in order to survive with other warriors and be successful and survive at all. They have to have rules, and those rules are important. And the idea of chivalry was a set of rules that placed the welfare of the weak above the strong. That's a profound thing to do. So there's that. But the flip side of it, of chivalry, would be the second part of what Chris wrote, and that is, it demanded valor of the urbane and modest man because everyone knew that he was as likely as not to be a milksop. So an example of that might be somebody on the Titanic, for example, where it was women and children first. And this is something that's hard to understand, but if you don't understand this, you don't understand anything about warriors or civilizations or anything really of any value. The reason that a man would go down to his certain death in icy waters on the bridge of the Titanic by giving his seat to either a woman or a child who he could easily physically pry it from. You think about this for a second. You are faced with dying in icy waters or going into a lifeboat and throwing that woman or that child overboard and getting the seat and surviving. Well, the whole purpose of a moral code and civilization is that whether they realized it consciously or not, everybody on the Titanic, every man on that Titanic who abided by women and children first, understood that it would be worse to live than it would be to die. It would be more unpleasant to live in a society where you violated that kind of a code to that degree than it would be to die. And I think if you really get down to the essence of it, that's what motivates so many soldiers. Certainly, I certainly don't want to tell present-day soldiers what to do or how they live or what codes they go by. God knows I'm not worthy of that. But I can make a comment about historical soldiers. And one of the things that Shelby Foote wrote about in the Civil War trilogy was the idea that that when people were facing horrific violence and almost certain death in the Confederacy, for example, Shelby Foote said that if Robert E. Lee comes by on his gray horse Traveler and says, "Men, I need you to take that hill," he said, the idea of a man standing up to him and saying, Marse Robert, I ain't going. I'm not going. He said nobody has that kind of courage. That's a profound insight that Shelby Foote had. That nobody had, that not a man alive had the kind of courage it would take to basically turn himself into that much of a dishonorable creature in front of a pillar, a shrine of honor and integrity that Robert E. Lee was. It's better, it's less painful to go charging up a hill and have your arms blown off by cannonballs than it is to stand in front of Robert E. Lee and say, I'm not going. It's less unpleasant to go. And that's the flip side of this chivalry thing on the second half that C.S. Lewis was talking about that Chris Taylor quoted. It basically, chivalry not only moderates people who are naturally heroic, it also motivates people who are naturally cautious or cowardly. It's a profoundly great system. So let's see what else he wrote. He said that as such, quote, it offers the only possible escape from a world divided between wolves who do not understand and sheep who cannot defend the things which make life desirable. My God, I had no idea about this quote. Chris, I'm so happy you gave me this question here. Again, what do you say about guys like C.S. Lewis, other than glad he's on our team? What he's basically saying here verbatim is perfect. It's like wolves which do not understand civilization and sheep which cannot defend civilization are both motivated to protect civilization, in fact, to create civilization through chivalry, through the idea of doing the right thing. Women and children first. Don't harm women. You protect the weak at your own expense and even at the course of your own life if necessary. That the weak and the defenseless, your job is to get in front of those people instead of behind them. One of the things that came out of the Iraq War early that made me feel like we were on the right side of things, I still feel that way, was a picture of, it turns out there were many pictures. There's one of them of two U.S. soldiers who are sitting in a sitting position returning fire, and there's a father and his son hiding behind them. And they're using their physical bodies. They've got some body armor, but that's their faces and that's their legs and their limbs, and they're basically putting their physical life in front of those other people, and in front of enemy civilians, Iraqi civilians. And that's when I realized I thought I was on the right team, because their soldiers hide behind civilians, and our soldiers protect their civilians with their lives. That's the kind of side I want to be on. So it is incredible, really. It really is this idea. So the final part of the question from Chris is, can you compare and contrast this Western ideal with the ideal of the warrior poet you discussed previously? I think the only thing I can add to that is what C.S. Lewis is talking about here, again, just to recap, is the idea that a code of honor and chivalry civilizes the warrior and encourages and motivates the poet. But the idea of a warrior poet means that kind of synthesis is not external. In other words, if you have a warrior who is mitigated by the idea of chivalry from doing brutal things, or just a milksop is the term he used, who suddenly has to step up and enter a burning building because it's expected of him, you're really talking about enforcing something on those people from the outside, something that's not in their nature. But a warrior poet is somebody that doesn't need it externally because he has, in fact, both of those things. And so his motivation is not a code that he's required to believe in so much as it's part of his moral internal dialogue. He decides, I could kill these people because I'm far more skilled at weapons than they are, but I'm not going to, even though I could, even though it might be in my short-term benefit too. I'm not going to do it because it's the wrong thing to do. And the reason he knows it's the wrong thing to do is because he's a poet. Likewise, because he's a poet and he has this moral code and this moral compass, he has the physical ability to act and to bring that morality into the world. It's a perfectly fine thing to be a poet sitting on a top of a mountain someplace, thinking about how nice it would be if people behaved themselves and if people obeyed the law and if strong people put weak people in front of them. That'd be nice. But a warrior poet can actually get it done. He can actually enforce it in the world. And this, I think, is the essence of this fusion that we've been talking about with this question. Namely, the unusual or really quite remarkable idea that there are some people and some philosophies that understand the great apparent dichotomy. And the dichotomy is, how do kind and decent people square themselves with using violence and fatal violence? In some cases, widespread lethal violence. How do you square these two things? And I think ultimately the idea of the warrior poet is the poet is the person who understands morally that some things are worth defending, and that they are so worth defending that they are in fact worth killing for. And if you get to that place, then you can do both. But as Chris points out, that's a remarkable thing about the code of chivalry. It externalizes for either side of the either two extremes, and for anybody on the spectrum in the middle. It externalizes what the warrior poet has internally, and makes a warrior poet mentality accessible to both extreme warriors and extreme poets and everybody on the spectrum in between. So that's about it, I think. Great question, Chris. Thanks very much. Walter Almeida says, would you let your employees carry firearms at the properties and offices of Bill Whittle Enterprises? I'd not only allow it, I'd require it. Zachariah Tiemans says, because I'm not going to let anybody work for me who I don't have confidence in, and if I've got confidence in them, then I expect that, I'd love to have them be able to help defend me and the rest of the folks against lunatics and madmen like the Santa Barbara Virgin, or the rest of those people who may have a problem with the stuff I'm saying. So, yeah, Walter, it would be an honor and a privilege. And I'd make sure we all had adequate training, not just in the ability to hit the target, although that's kind of important, but I think the kind of training that's important to have in the real world is kind of stress training. And I haven't had much of this, not nearly as much as I should have or would like. When I say stress training, I mean the kind of training where you're talking about these sort of large physical motions to make sure that you don't blow your own foot off, hopefully just your foot. Because it's not a question of being able to, a lot of people know how to load a weapon, and a lot of people know how to rack a pistol, and a lot of people know how to take the correct stance with the correct grip, and they know how to hit a target. The question is, can you do these things in the second or two that you might have available if somebody's literally bashing down the door, or comes through the door shooting or something? And I think the main kind of training that I certainly feel like I need, I can hit a target okay. I'm not a terrific shot, but I'm a decent shot. The kind of training I need more of is the kind of training in terms of like working under stress. And this is the kind of training I had in aviation. From the beginning. Not only was I getting it, I sought it out. I was working as a glider. I was the line chief in crystal soaring up in the Mojave Desert. So I was working for $50 a day, and these are from 8 till 8, 12-hour days in the summer anyway. And I was working at the glider port in order to get some flight training, and I was living with my flight instructor and a tow pilot. We had a 3-bedroom apartment in Palmdale, which is not a great place. But we get out there every day and do all this stuff. So the reason I bring this up is because since I was so switched on and wanted to be a fighter pilot and wanted to train hard, and since flight instructors like that in a student, it's nice to find a student who's switched on and who really wants kind of the whole 9 yards in terms of what they can teach. My flight training was nothing but stress, spins, slips, rope breaks lower and lower and lower. We were doing rope breaks at 200 feet routinely by the time I was ready to done with the glider flying. I mean, 300 feet is pretty low. So we were stressing ourselves all the time. And as I've said before, by some really remarkable combination of circumstances, I had 2 complete power failures in a single-engine airplane in my first 200 hours, which is unheard of. Most people never have them ever in 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 hours. But they were non-events because this wasn't the first time this had happened to me. So a couple people have offered some courses and mentioned it, and thank you very much for that, Adam, and everybody else, and I will take you up on it when I get my office set up and I have time to breathe, because I really need to get on a very regular schedule here. And it's the lack of the office space that's keeping me kind of over stressed, because until I have that office set up, I can't get my weekly schedule on a regular routine. And so since I can't get it on a routine, it's kind of ad hoc around the other fires that have to be put out. But this is all going to change very quickly, I expect, by the end of June. So anyway, yes, Walter, I would definitely allow them, and I'd encourage it. Moving on here. Zechariah Tiemans asks, do the recent victories for the right in foreign elections, such as UKIP and like movements in Europe and the new PMs in Australia and India, mean that the world can no longer afford to take their chances with U.S. leadership? Put another way, is it just a coincidence that world politics has shifted to the right, or are they compensating for our leftist administration? It's kind of a two-part question, I think. And the two parts of it are, whenever our foreign moves towards more conservatism a result of American leftism, I don't necessarily believe that that's true. I think that really what you really see when you see people moving conservatively is that they're fed up with their own mismanagement and bungling and economic incompetence and regulations and all that other stuff. Certainly that's what Margaret Thatcher was. I don't think she was, suddenly they were pining away for or worried that Jimmy Carter wasn't strong enough, though I suppose that contributed to it to some degree. So I think countries tend to go conservative when they've had enough of this liberal nonsense. And I think we're starting to see that this doesn't work and that the spending doesn't work and nobody has confidence in the money anymore, any of this stuff. So there's that. One thing I should say parenthetically, I think, is that one of the problems with both parliaments, European parliaments in general, but European attitudes and multiculturalism in particular, is that since so much of what those European populations in Britain and France, just for examples, let's say, so much of this is enforced from the top down through either Labour governments or through EU governments. There's so many people now losing their entire identity as Brits or Frenchmen that, unfortunately, what you often see in Europe is you go from left-wing progressivism virtually into, Nazism and fascism fast. There's not a big, strong middle ground of individual liberty and opportunity there. And this goes very, very quickly to this idea that somehow the opposite of communism is Nazism. It's just not true. I mean, I think Jonah Goldberg did a really great job of pointing this out. But, again, it's a simple little thing, and the left goes nuts when you mention it. But the Nazis were the National Socialist German Workers' Party. They're socialists. Well, they're not socialists. They're the opposite of socialism. How so? How are they the opposite of socialism? They're racial socialists, and communists are international socialists, but they're still socialists. They're both Nazism and communism are giant states that are in favor of gun control, universal employment, universal health care, the idea that the children don't belong to individual people but belong to the state. Nazism and communism are virtually identical in this regard, and they're very similar to the same things that American progressives want and that they have in socialist countries all around the world. Britain, for example. Socialized medicine, the government decides whether you're going to live or die, and too bad for you, that's it. So, unfortunately, Europe has a tendency to be not as well represented, or for the people not to feel, I think, maybe as in control of their lives as we at least used to here in America. And so often you go from left-wing pretty much over to real racial kind of policies like National Front and so on, which is, not the way to go. The opposite of socialism is not Nazism. The opposite of socialism and Nazism and communism is small government, limited government, individual people, individual rights, self-defense, gun ownership, capitalism, free markets, rights and responsibilities. It's the opposite of both of those things. It's like the opposite of communism isn't Nazism. It's like they're Coke and Pepsi. They're two different brands of cola. The opposite of them both is, orange juice. So there you go. But anyway, the second part of the question is, are they compensating for our leftist administration? Without question, I think you can see around the world that countries are quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, saying, we can't depend on the United States anymore. Now, this is a catastrophe. And the only thing I'll say that is the littlest tiny bit of schadenfreude in this is that they're finally waking up to the fact that for the last 70 years, we've been their defense. The reason they have socialized health care in Britain is because we paid for most of their defense. Great Britain probably has the second or third most capable military in the world, but it's certainly not enough to have deterred the Soviet Union, and likewise for France, and likewise for Germany. We were their defense program. American taxpayers paid the defense bill not only for America but for the world, and that meant that German and French and British workers didn't have to pay for it, so they could afford to have their socialist paradise. What I think they're starting to realize overseas now is that even though we have a tremendous investment in these things, it's starting to dawn on them the same way it's dawning on our adversaries and the same way it's dawning on us, American citizens and patriots, that the presence of the world's most mighty sword is meaningless if you don't have the will to wield it. You could have, you could have Andoril, the sword of the West, forged by the elves. A sword with enchantment and powers built into it, magical sword that can cut the ring off of the finger of Sauron, and that's great. But it's only great if you've got somebody willing to swing that sword, willing to wield it. And I think the one thing that has really shocked our allies, certainly shocked me, and I'm sure it's shocked you, is that you don't have to sink or scuttle 16 carrier battle groups. All you have to do is be unwilling to use them. Likewise, the same for air power or special forces or any of that stuff. And I think they began to realize that. And I look at what's happening to the military and realize that, no, he's not stupid enough. The progressives aren't stupid enough to scuttle carrier battle groups or to just plain out disarm or dismantle entire battalions. What they're doing is they're making it so miserable for the actual warriors still in the military that they're forcing the warriors out. And the people that are coming in, with notable exceptions, obviously, are less capable, less honorable, less conservative, less K. They're more and more political appointees. They're more and more looking at it as just another form of government job. I know I spoke to a guy who's a commander of a Green Beret unit, a big unit, and I don't want to say how big because I don't want to isolate the guy, but he's leaving because of all of the nonsense that he's being asked to do. He's being asked, he's not being asked, you don't get asked in the military, he's being ordered to ask his men, under his command, these warriors, do they have guns at home, and if so, how many? He said, I'm not going to obey that order. I'm just telling you right now, I'm not going to obey that order. So sometimes they let it slide and sometimes they not. But when you find out that these guys who are supposed to be special operations guys, instead of training their men, they're forced to inspect all of them for tattoos that may be considered inappropriate or offensive by the most offended member of a million-person military, then you have to start asking yourself, why would somebody stay in the military under those circumstances? And the answer is they wouldn't, and they're leaving in large numbers, and that's not accidental, and it's terrifying. So I think, Zechariah, I think what you're really saying is really true. I think it's without question becoming clear to Japan, and I suspect that Germany and Europe is starting to realize that they can't depend on us anymore. They can't assume that we're going to be there for them the way they had up until this president came along. And that worries them. Now, to some degree, the idea of them shouldering more of their defense budget makes me happy. And the idea that they have to be having a little more skin in the game also makes me happy. But it doesn't make me happy that the reason they're doing this is because it is widely perceived among our allies that we can't live up to our obligations anymore, because if our allies understand that, then certainly our adversaries in Russia and China understand that. You notice I didn't say our adversaries. I said our adversaries in Russia and China, because they are our adversaries. They are not our friends, and they're not working to the same purposes as we are. They're our adversaries. I won't call them enemies until we're actually shooting at them, but they're our adversaries. And if we're not willing to accept that and understand that, then we're being stupid. And one final thing I'll say about that, of all the pieces out on the board right now, the one if I was president tomorrow, the one nation I would be cultivating, and I mean hard, is India. That would be, I think, I don't know if it'd be the first person I saw in the White House. I suspect that would probably be Great Britain or Israel or Australia. I think I'd probably see those three people first and maybe simultaneously, Great Britain, Israel, and Australia. But I would aggressively court India, aggressively, for a number of reasons. They've got a big economy that's getting bigger. They have 1 billion people. They border China. They share much of the same cultural heritage as the United States, strangely enough, through the Raj, through the British Empire, instilled a great deal of Western and really British values. And they're hardworking people, and they're extremely brave people. The Indian troops and Gurkhas and all these other guys were just tremendous. But when you've got 1 billion people who are growing and whose economy is growing, who border China and are not far from Russia, that's where I would be. Dave Big Booty in the comment section over there says, "Don't forget Canada." Eh? And Dave, I got to tell you, I love Canada. I love Canadians, but I am going to forget Canada. Canada is in the fight in Afghanistan. There's no question that Canada is continuing to provide troops. Canada is, what am I trying to say here? Canada is doing the right thing and continues to do the right thing, but they're doing the right thing with such ridiculously small units now that you really have to ask yourself on the larger level, is Canada in this fight for civilization? I mean, I read that after World War II, Canada had the 4th largest navy in the world. I don't know that they have any warships left anymore. I think Canada has turned considerably more conservative lately, and I admire them for that. I admire the Canadians I've met. I've admired Canada as a nation, a very civilized, decent nation. And Canada has, throughout its entire history, punched well above its weight. But they don't seem to be doing much of that anymore. The people that they're sending into combat are punching way above their weights. Their sniper teams are extraordinary. But as a nation, they don't seem to be putting the same number of players on the field that they used to, and there's something to that. That's important. Anyway, that's that. Moving on, Jacob Belchak asks, if doesn't take a genius to figure out why dear leader Barry was willing to trade 5 Guantanamo Bay prisoners, which is still open in case anyone forgot that promise, for a country-hating soldier. But since you are a genius, I'd like to hear your top-flight analysis on this. Well, I'm hardly a genius, and I don't know. I did 2 trifectas about it earlier this week, and I did an afterburner, which I think drops tomorrow, talking about a little bit about this, not much about this, sort of a little bit about this. So the second I saw this, the instant I saw this, this trade for what's-his-name, Bergdahl, I thought, he's doing this because he's coming off of a VA scandal, and he wants a photo op with soldiers and soldiers' families, and he wants the photo op. So there he is with the parents on the lawn. He's wearing his blue open collar shirt. He's got a hand in his pocket. Everything's just kind of casual and loose. He's talking about this prisoner exchange, and my first attitude was, number one, stand up straight and put on a tie, and get your hand out of your pocket. This isn't. We're not at Buffalo Wings watching an NBA game here. You're the president of the United States. You got an important announcement to make. Stand up. I know that's a trivial thing to say, but it's true. I look at his body language on this thing. You could tell he didn't want to be there. He doesn't care about this stuff. Secondly, when the father makes his announcement and says something in Arabic about Islam and the Blessed Prophet, I pointed this out on Trifecta. You will occasionally see parents of people who are being held hostage or who've been kidnapped or taken prisoner, and you can see them on camera pleading via remote control with the captors not to hurt their loved ones. And I certainly can understand that and respect that, and I wouldn't have any problem with anybody who said something that I consider downright treasonous. If somebody's holding your daughter or your son You certainly get a pass from me if you want to say, hey, you know, we really think you're great and you're awesome and America's a problem and all this other stuff. But when you see that happen, I've seen it several times happen, you can tell that the parents have a sense of horror and shame and embarrassment and pleading. But when that father made his speech, he didn't have that look at all. When that father had that speech, he had a look of triumph. And the son was already released. He had this look of triumph and this smile when he was saying, Allah the most merciful, or whatever the hell he was saying. That didn't ring true with me. So, look, I don't think there's any question about it. I think that Susan Rice decided that we need to get some good veterans publicity out of this. And once again, the title of my afterburner is, you know, Showtime, evil or stupid. Are they evil or are they just stupid? Well, they're both. But in the case of this prisoner exchange, I suspect it's mostly stupid. I think they just wanted something badly, needed something badly for political cover, found out there was a guy who's been a POW for 5 years, decides he's going to free the guy, didn't do the research, or if they didn't think much of it. Certainly they don't care whether the guy's a deserter or not, or a collaborator or a traitor. They just know, hey, it's a little shiny little thing we can put on the table to show American people that we really, really, really love our troops. And I think they just went ahead and did it and made the announcement and expected the glory to flow. And I think they were as astonished, just astonished that there would be blowback over this, because I don't think they think about these things. But without question, Jacob, without question, they did it. He did it in order to get a quick publicity hit. And what do you say about that? You know, I mean, there's a still picture of them walking down the external breezeway in the White House. And there's the President of the United States with his arms around both of these people's waists, and they've got their arms around him, and his jacket's open. It's from the rear. They're walking away. And it looks like a freeze frame at the end of Three's Company or something. It's like, ba-da-da-da-da. It's like, look at me, the swell president. I got these people's kids back home. They brought their boy home. Aren't I wonderful? It's sickening and shocking to me. I don't know what. There's no bottom for this. There's never going to be a bottom. Every time I think we hit bottom, you ain't seen nothing yet. There's plenty more digging these guys can do. I just was appalled by it. And as the details of this guy came out, and you begin to find out what he was doing, and 6 guys were killed looking for him, or 14, or something like this, you know, it really is just shocking that they could be so stupid as not to see this. But no, I don't think they knew that this was coming. I don't think they went and released him because they knew he was a Muslim sympathizer. I think they just didn't think it through. They didn't think fast and furious through. When they moved the trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed from Gitmo to downtown Manhattan, they thought they were going to be cheered, and the same way they thought they were going to be cheered here, and the way they thought they were going to be cheered for Fast and Furious, and the way they just are so far from the American mainstream. They're so far. This really is the point, actually, since you asked, Jacob. The bottom line is, the President of the United States and his advisors are so far emotionally, mentally, politically, philosophically from the American mainstream that it never even entered their radar that this might be something that people would have a problem with. Never entered their radar. What do you mean? He walked off the post? Okay, well, fine. He's kidnapped. He's been a prisoner for 5 years. Bring him back. Get him on the Rose Garden with me. The idea that this would be reprehensible to Americans doesn't enter his head because he doesn't have any idea of what Americans are about. And when they moved Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's trial to downtown Manhattan, they were amazed that people were having a problem with this, because this little ideologue, which is what he is, this little ideologue, this little man who's grown up in faculty lounges and who handed out forms for a living, thought that people would cheer him for having the moral courage to try these people in downtown Manhattan as actual criminals rather than having them stowed away in this horrible, horrible, horrible stain out of Americans' honor, which is Guantanamo Bay. They were absolutely amazed. Well, welcome to the world, champ. This one is going to stick. And it's not just that this one is going to stick. They're all starting to stick. And if you look at the point I was trying to make in the afterburner is, because this guy is his administration is so far away from mainstream American values that they constantly make these kind of missteps. And then to cover the missteps, they have a choice. They only have a choice. If there's only 2 choices and they have to pick one. Did we do what we did because we were evil, or did we do what we did because we're stupid? The American people think that trading 5 top-level terrorists for a collaborator, traitor, deserter is evil. It's evil, and I think it's evil. But their position is going to be, well, we didn't know, so they're going to go with stupid. They went with stupid on the KSM trial. According to the administration, Barack Obama did not know that the trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was going to take place in Manhattan until the day that Eric Holder admitted it to the American people. In other words, the president said, oh, you know what, Eric, you hold this trial wherever you want to, and don't bother telling me where. So the day that Eric Holder says it's going to be in Manhattan, the president of the United States likes to say, that's when I found out about it. Really? Okay, so you're not evil, you're just stupid. All these guns in Mexico, all this gun violence is a result of American guns crossing the border. Actually, no, sir, it's not. It's 3% of the guns are from America. Well, if I'm going to be humiliated like this as Barack Obama, then for God's sakes, we'll see about that. If the guns in the Mexican drug cartels are not coming from America, and I said they are, but they're not, then I'll see to it that they are. So let's send a few thousand guns down there untraceably, and let's put them in the hands of the Mexican cartels so that when people are killed with guns that came from America, we can crack down on gun ownership here in America. In other words, there wasn't a problem there in the first place, but he said there was, so he manufactured a problem so he'd be able to face himself and also get his tyrannical policies here at home in place. And so, once again, the president didn't know about this? No. Eric Holder did this on his own? Yep. President had no idea? Nope. Okay, so you're not evil, you're stupid? That's it. Funny, Eric Holder still has a job if after making the unilateral decision for the KSM trial and the unilateral decision for Fast and Furious, plus a bunch of others, you'd think that a guy who unilaterally made those decisions would be hung out to dry pretty soon, but he's not. And it's because he has the proof that he didn't come up with these things. And so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. So what do you want to say about this guy? He's not an American. He may be legally American. I suspect he probably is. If I had to guess, I'd suspect that he probably is. But he, without question, is not an American in the way that we understand the term. He's not from here. He ain't from here. He may legally be an American, but he ain't from here. He grew up on the beach in Hawaii, and I grew up on the beach in Bermuda. And they're about as much a part of mainland America as the other one is. I know Hawaii is a state. I'm not unaware of that. But I grew up on a beach. And growing up on a beach is not the same as being an American, and it is sure not the same as the black experience in America. And he grew up in Indonesia. So there you go. The difference between Barack Obama and me is that when I was in Bermuda, I not only wanted to be American, I wanted to defend America. And I've been studying and proud of this country and connected to it culturally ever since. He's not. So there's your answer. Boom. Moving on. Isaac Tiemens comes up with a question. He says that given that America is being run by a bunch of Islamist sympathizers and red diaper babies, is the Prime Minister of Israel the interim leader of the free world? If not Israel, or perhaps Canada, who recently affirmed that Islamic terrorism is still the biggest threat to their security, to whom do we look for leadership on the world stage? Man, I would take Bibi Netanyahu. I think I'd give Israel like half our navy in exchange for Netanyahu as president. Honestly, that guy is terrific. Tough, smart, controlled, emotionally controlled, intellectually controlled, well-educated, not just in politics. An engineer, I believe. Yeah, Netanyahu's the leader of the free world. I wish he was more vocal than he is. It's tough to have to depend on Islamicists and Marxists for your livelihood when for most of your life it's been free people that you were depending on. But free people decide to vote in idiots. It's happened before. It happened in Germany and happened elsewhere. And so pretty much with the throw of an election switch, Netanyahu finds himself with what was once his bulwark and bastion is now his prison wall. He's literally found himself on the other side of a wall that he's been behind his entire life. I think he's handled it about as well as he could handle it. He's certainly swallowed a lot of personal insults that I don't know that certainly must not have been easy to swallow for a man who's that much more capable and courageous than the President of the United States. But yeah, Isaac, I think Netanyahu's the guy. and I love him, and I wish he was ours. As that great old line about Robert E. Lee we were talking about earlier. There was a well-documented story. He was on his first campaign into the North that ended at Antietam, the 62 campaign. And the Confederate Army was marching through the town of Frederick, Maryland. And these hungry wolves, that's how they kept describing the Confederate soldiers. They're so thin and so ornery and lean and mean-looking, these wolves, these pack of wolves with no uniforms, and most of them didn't have shoes. And then all of a sudden, Robert E. Lee comes riding through town, a tall man on a big horse. They said his head and his neck, that Robert E. Lee's head and neck were somebody said he had the biggest neck in all of Christendom. And a Union woman, this devoutly Union sympathizer, young woman, looked out the window, watched Robert E. Lee walk by, and said, "Oh, how I wish he were ours." And yeah, I get that feeling all the time these days. Now I wish he were ours. Vladimir Putin is a murderer and a brute and a tyrant and all of those things. But there are times when qualities that he has, I wish were ours as well. He's a pragmatist, he's a realist, he's tough, and he loves his country. He loves his culture. He's a Russian nationalist. I respect that. In some cases, I admire it. If there weren't so many personal morality issues in his life, I'd admire him more. I think he's a murderer, and I think he's a tyrant. I think he's an aggressor and a bully. But he loves his country, and he's extraordinarily good at protecting its interests, and that is something I admire and something I wish was ours. We used to have that. I don't think we do anymore, and we'll find out about whether we'll ever have it again. Moving on. Looks like we're going to be a relatively brief show tonight, maybe a little over an hour 15, something like that. I need to get some rest. I'm going out of town tomorrow and get this office open. We can party a little longer. Look, it's Zechariah Tiemens for the trifecta. Isaac, now Zechariah. The Stratosphere Lounge with Lyda Loudon was, in my opinion, one of the best ones you've ever done. God, that girl. Is there any chance of us seeing a Clavin and Whittle live of sorts? In other words, having Andrew Clavin as a guest on the Stratosphere Lounge. Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. There's two different things that are going on here, Zechariah. One hand, I heard from many people, and I certainly felt, that having a guest really opened the show up and was really interesting and fun and different and cool. So that was great, and Lyda was a fun first choice, and Jeremy Boring is just on the opposite side of that wall. Andrew Clavin, all the rest of these guys. I have some very, very interesting friends: Alfonso Rachel, Evan Sayet, Mike Walsh. These are people who I see frequently, and I'd love to do a show with them and have guest hosting kind of things where it's just the two of us chatting based on questions from the Facebook page, which is how this show has been set up from the beginning. So there's that. Other people have said, no, the Stratosphere Lounge is a different format. This is what the Stratosphere Lounge is, and they'd hate to see it turn into that. And I guess I've mentioned that again, we've been delayed on The Office. We got The Office. You saw The Office walkthrough a couple Stratosphere Lounges ago. But when we get into The Office and I can get the rest of the daily content up, the Time Over Target in the morning and the Bill Me in the afternoon, then we can start to do our show that we've been talking about called Speakeasy, which came from you fine people here in the Stratosphere Lounge, where we would basically rent a theater, and if it's 100 people, well, great. If it's a 40-seat theater, great. If it's a 200-seat theater, great. As long as we're selling tickets, we'll put it there. But the idea of Speakeasy would be a living room set, and it would just be no walls, just not a set. It's just a couple couches and a black box theater. And then it would be 4 or 5 of us sitting around chatting about things. That may be where we're headed with this. I think when we get to the new studio, the one thing I do know for the new studio would be we're going to have, and people have mentioned, just parenthetically have mentioned Zoe, obviously, and Nick Searcy and Adam Baldwin. Adam Baldwin would be great. Nick Searcy, I don't know. I don't know if the membership would survive. Nick Searcy, international film and television star. Yeah, but these are friends, and obviously they'd be great fun to have. So whether or not they become Stratosphere Lounge or not, I don't know. But I do know that when we get into the new office space, instead of me in this little edit bay, this edit bay is 260 square feet, I think, We're going to be in 1,500 square feet. We're going to have, we can pick up a couple of lavalier mics. We've got them already. And a couple of cameras, and put all of it into Ustream and switch. So we'd have our operations manager, Desiree Gabrielle, who's a remarkable person. I just absolutely love to death. Best thing that ever happened to me. She could be switching the show. We have wide shots, close-ups, reversals. It'd be a lot more interesting visually than just the two of us in this little frame. And I think we'll give that a try. And if it turns out that people feel like, well, that's not the Stratosphere Lounge, then we'll do it on Speakeasy. But I kind of think generally every second or third week maybe a guest would be great. As long as we don't lose too much of this kind of fundamental format, I think we'll be in good shape. So we'll see. But yeah, that Speakeasy thing is on its way, and it'll be the last of the new programming. And all of that new programming is going to be dependent on the new space, which has been negotiated with an actual attorney for the last 2 weeks and got me some concessions I kind of desperately needed. And so I expect we'll sign that lease on Monday and hopefully be in there by the 15th or the 20th of June. But this time, as I said briefly, as a brief aside, instead of me making all these promises that I then have to backpedal on until they're ready, this time we're going to have the product on the shelves, ready to go, and then we're going to open the doors to the store. It's a novel idea. I know. That'll certainly help my peace of mind. But yes, so I hope to do some more guests maybe once every third or fourth weeks. We'll see how it goes, and if we like it, great, and if not, we'll do it. But I'd love to have the Speakeasy thing. We're going to have the Speakeasy thing, and it would be especially great for those of you who could make it to come on down to the somewhere probably in the Valley, North Hollywood, Studio City, something like that. And come on down and get a chance to meet everybody in person, hang out afterwards, and have a beer. And then the last of the Tiemans trifecta here on my page of shame is from Joshua Tiemans, who says, before the 2012 election, you said that if we lose, the left would corrupt the ballot box permanently, such as that it would alter elections permanently. Do you still believe this? Let me just answer that real quick. I kind of do. I don't know how much rot is in there now. I do know that without question, these progressives are governing in such a way as they don't think they're ever going to lose again. The NSA violations, the weaponization of the IRS, the level of these scandals, Benghazi, all this stuff that they've been covering up and pretending that didn't happen actually did happen. But they're acting like they're never going to lose again, like there's never going to be a conservative or at least a Republican attorney general ever again, that there's never going to be a Republican president who's going to look into these things. That in itself is kind of scary, to be honest with you. I have friends who are conservative warriors on my team who think that Hillary is inevitable. I think Hillary's inevitable too. I think it's inevitable that she's going to lose. I don't see any way she's going to win. Obviously, I see a way where she's going to win. I mean, I suppose if you had to bet, that'd probably be the safest bet, but I don't think she's going to be the next president. I think Ted Cruz is going to be the next president. I really do. Let me say one thing about Ted Cruz that's goes to an issue that probably should use some clarification on my part, and I know I'm going to lose some support over this, but let's just get it out of the way right now. I've had a couple people say that, Bill, your support for Ted is wonderful, and we love Ted, and Ted's awesome, but Ted's not eligible because he was because his dad was Ted was born in Canada, I think, and Ted's claim to American citizenship is actually somewhat shakier than Barack Obama's, and basically he's not eligible, and we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. To which I say I respectfully disagree. A standard, a precedent is like a streak. It's like a winning streak. Once it's broken, it's broken. To take what I think is the best candidate and the best hope this country has off of the table because of a moral standard that was broken, shattered by the progressives, is to me continuing to fight by the Marquis of Queensberry's rules against people who are gutter fighters with knives and shivs. I don't agree. I did agree. I would like for it to have been a standard that was maintained. But it's broken, and it's not something you can unbreak. All you can do now is tie your hands in retrospect to make up for the fact that they cheated. So I do not think that Barack Obama was eligible because I take the constructionist view of natural-born citizen, which, for those of you who might have some particular problems with me taking that, disqualifies me. My mom is a British subject. The idea of natural-born citizen was somebody who was born in America to American parents. And the idea behind that only applied to the president, didn't apply to members of Congress at all, or governors. The idea was that the commander-in-chief of the United States should not have a conflict by being overly sympathetic to some other country. In my case, it would be Great Britain, and that would be the one that the founders were most worried about. In Barack Obama's case, it's, who knows, Kenya, Islam. He's certainly sympathetic to Islam in a way that I'm not. So I don't think he qualified. And the idea of not providing the birth certificate and making it a running joke and kind of gaslighting the American people with the birth certificate is shameful and shocking. I think Ted Cruz should produce his birth certificate and explain how he came to be an American citizen. But the fact of the matter is that precedent has been shattered, and it cannot be unshattered. And so, like the Marines fighting the Japanese on Guadalcanal, who went to take the surrender of a small garrison off an island, walked towards the white flag, had the Japanese open up with machine guns, we're not taking any more surrenders. I'm not in the mood to take any more surrenders. We're fighting people who fight dirty, and they have already established that the President of the United States can be sworn in with the amount of credentials that Barack Obama has provided. So, if that's the new standard, I abhor the new standard, but it is the new standard. You can't undo the last two elections. Therefore, Ted Cruz is my guy. So, if we get into that in the future, that's my position, and I'm sticking to it. I think he's going to be the next president. I think he's smart and tough. And did I mention smart? And having a last name like Cruz doesn't hurt. And Ted Cruz, let me just say one last thing about Cruz here. This is important. When you look at how the Democrats defeat Republicans, they do it through demonization, and they demonize our candidates by putting them into one of three boxes. And those boxes are labeled old, evil, and stupid. And let's play along, shall we? John McCain was old, and John McCain might have been evil. He certainly wasn't stupid. Mitt Romney was neither old or stupid, so he had to be triply evil. They had to really ladle on the evil to get to Romney, who was not only, as I say, he was young and smart, so he has to be triply evil. Sarah Palin, of course, is stupid and evil. George Bush is stupid and evil. Let's see, Newt Gingrich would be, he's certainly not stupid, so he's got to be evil and getting old. And you can play this all day. All day. Old, evil, stupid, or all three would be even better. Now, the problem with Ted Cruz is not stupid. He was magna cum laude at Harvard Law. His professors say he's the most brilliant student they've ever seen. Obama supporters could say that too, but we don't know his records. Cruz's we do. Cruz is brilliant, so he's not stupid. And he's not old. He's obviously not old. He looks like he's half the age of Hillary, so he's young and he's smart, which means that they're going to have to ladle on the evil on Cruz as hard as they can. But the problem is that Ted Cruz is not evil. Anybody who spends any time in his presence understands there's a genuine warmth and concern that comes off of him, a personal warmth that you don't get. I met Mitt Romney and I've met Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz is the kind of guy who I feel like could call you up and hang with a barbecue. Ted Cruz is neither old or stupid or evil, and that's why they fear him, and that's why he has to be destroyed. But he's not going to do it. And I'll say one more thing about Ted Cruz that I cannot say about Mitt Romney, who I thought would have been an excellent president as a general rule. Ted Cruz has charisma. Ted Cruz is smart. Ted Cruz is young. Ted Cruz is Hispanic. All of these things are good. But Ted Cruz has courage. And I know he has courage because he filibustered Obamacare pretty much by himself. That is taking a moral position that everybody advised him not to take, that at the time looked like it was going to do him enormous damage. Turned out he was right. That's courage. And courage means the willingness to fight. And Ted Cruz is smart enough to listen to people like me when I say things like Rebel Alliance. He was there when I gave that speech. I don't remember whether I introduced him, whether I preceded him or followed him, but he listened and he uses it, and he uses it to great effect. I'm not trying to take credit for it. I'm just saying Ted gets it. And I don't know if I ever told this story on the show, but you all probably know there was a gigantic blow-up back, I guess, in January where I made some hyperbolic comments in Texas. And these idiots over at, they're not idiots, by the way, at Daily Cost took it seriously. They knew I was joking. and Ted Cruz knew I was joking, and the people in the room knew I was joking, and the people at Daily Cause also knew I was joking, but they played it like I was serious, and they made a big deal out of it. Well, I got to see Ted about 3 months after that for the first time in person. I was at the same table with him, and he came out, and I said, Ted, I hope this blow-up didn't cost you anything. I hope it didn't hurt you at all. That's not an apology. That's just saying I hope it didn't hurt you. He started laughing. He said, no, it was hilarious. We talk about it all the time. Everybody in the room was laughing. I was laughing. We thought it was one of the most fun introductions we've ever done. That's courage. That's a guy who understands that he's going to be demonized and attacked no matter what he does. Just because he's got an R after his name, he's going to be demonized and attacked, and so he doesn't back down. He doesn't say, well, Bill, maybe in the future you might want to, or maybe, no, it's like, it was hilarious. Don't apologize. No need to apologize. We thought it was funny. We got it. Boom. I admire that a lot. So there you go. And the second half of that question was, I'm going to let that go. Chris Taylor says, is Star Trek, the original series, a K fantasy, and Star Trek The Next Generation an R fantasy? Does that say anything about the culture of the viewers or TV studios in 1966 versus 1987? I know a lot of people don't like this arcade thing, and I certainly have overplayed it a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this other than to say I'd never thought of it that way, but that is categorically precisely exactly what it is. Star Trek The Next Generation is about people who have already basically settled this area. It's about diplomats. It's about diplomacy, and about rules and the Prime Directive and law, and it's like the Star Trek The Next Generation is like the Star Wars prequels. It's about violations of trade agreements, and it's about people with British accents having huffy conversations about violations of obscure trading laws and all that other stuff. And the original series of Star Trek is like the original Star Wars. It's pre-progressive America. We're going to go out there with our six-shooting phaser pistols and our two-fisted action, and we're gonna punch out the bad guys, and we're gonna colonize the galaxy, and we're gonna have sex with a green Orion slave girl, and that's just before lunch. God knows what we're gonna do after lunch. And yeah, it's a completely different series and completely different ethos because it's a completely different country. It was a K country. It was a K time. It was a K selected species. It was a K selected show. One of the things that I talk about in my latest firewall, which I haven't linked to yet, it went up at midnight last night, and will be, I'll link to it. It'll be up first thing tomorrow morning on the Facebook page. It's called Danger, Danger, and it's a Lost in Space firewall. And I'm making the same point basically by saying you've got Don West, who is super K. He's tough and loyal, and he's a fighter, and he works hard, and he's aggressive, and he's dating space babe Judy, and he's he's a stud. And on the other hand, you have Dr. Smith, who's a liar, a shirker, intellectual. He's a coward. He hangs out with a boy. And basically what I was trying to say in that episode, I talked a bit about fathers and sons and Will Robinson. That's really important. But really, if you look at Lost in Space as an example, you've got Don and you've got Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith sold Don and the rest of the family out every single week. Don had to save Dr. Smith every single week. Their moral superiority of the K's in Don is infinitely greater. And the point I'm trying to make, and I got a couple lines off in that firewall I really like. I say that Dr. Smith is an intellectual, and he's very proud of his intelligence, and he constantly tells himself and everybody about how smart he is, Dr. Smith, and how Major West is just a brute and a savage and a military man, and he's just an animal. He's a savage. And yet Dr. Smith can't open a jackknife. Dr. Smith is utterly incompetent. Dr. Smith is not very smart. And the line I like so much is, Dr. Smith is an intellectual. Intellectualism is not intelligence. Intelligence is the ability to look at data, find a pattern, and make a prediction. Intellectualism is the ability to drop a pithy comment about something that's already happened. And the line I'm so proud of is, I say that intellectualism is intelligence that's been left in the back of the fridge for 7 months. And that's exactly what it is. So you've got, in Lost in Space, you've got between Don and Dr. Smith the perfect example of K-type selected Don and R selected Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith is selfish, venal. He will sell out everybody, including his best friend Will, He'll sell them all out for his personal gain, for either money or safety or pleasure back on Earth or power. He'll be a king. Sell them out every week. Don, who is constantly, life is in danger by Dr. Smith's treason, goes and rescues him every week because he has to, because it's chivalry, because he's a man, he's a warrior priest. And the thing I think that bears pointing out, and I try to point out, is Major West is far more intelligent than Dr. Smith. Major West can make a force field from parts taken out of the space stove. I mean, Major West is an infinitely more intelligent man than the great intellectual Dr. Smith, who constantly tells himself how smart he is. It's really terrific. It's a great example, and it's a fun firewall. I think I've had more fun with that piece than I've had in anything in years. Like I said, it reminds me a good deal of the Star Trek Afterburner. It's not as good as the Star Trek Afterburner. I had 3 weeks to prepare the Star Trek Afterburner. But it's fun, and it looks great. Lots of video clips and sound effects from the Jupiter 2, and that's just beautiful. Really very happy with it. I'll release it tomorrow. You can tell me what you think. Anyway, yeah. Star Trek original series is K. Competitors, honor, integrity, willingness to defend ourselves, confidence in ourselves, confidence in who we are, and willingness to fight for who we are. By the time you get later, you're dealing with guys that surrender and negotiate and, oh, we can't do this. All you need to know about the difference between the two Star Treks, since that basically was the question, is this. When Kirk would come upon a situation where he saw human beings being degraded to the level of children in terms of being dependent, like the episode, I guess was it The Apple, where you've got the giant reptile head, which is the computer of Baal, and the people's purpose is to feed matter into this computer, and the computer in exchange provides them with all the fruit they could ever want and nice weather, and they never have wars, and they never get sick, and they never get old, and they never die, because they're children. They're children. Kirk encounters a race of humans that is being made dependent, it's an interesting word, made dependent by the government of Baal. The government of Baal, the big reptile-headed, snake-headed computer, gives humans all of their food, all of their clothing, all of their requirements in exchange for being served 24 hours a day. And they'll never be anything, these people. They're never going to have their own aspirations. They're never going to have their own lives. But they're peaceful, and they're happy, and they're content, just like other children. Kirk sees that, and he says this is an abomination, and he puts the Enterprise phasers to work and blows that computer up and forces these people to live in a world of violence, but autonomy and self-determination. Picard would blow the Enterprise up to make sure that we didn't interfere in the subjugation of this race of humans. I keep saying Baal, it's Val. Picard would blow the Enterprise up rather than interfere with the degradation and the enslavement of a human species, because we're not allowed to meddle, you see. We have a higher moral standard than that. That's all you need to know about the two shows. The Next Generation is about preening moral superiority in a federation that is safe, secure, and prosperous. The original series is about the fundamental humanity of people, what it means to be human, what it means to be explorers, what it means to be adults. It's about freedom and liberty and risk and growth and greatness and compassion. In a way, compassion. See, this is the thing. People think, oh, Kirk is far less compassionate than Picard. But is he? If you take a look at these two examples of an enslaved humanity, enslaved to a computer in the shape of a giant snake, stunted, thank you, Brent, that's the word I was looking for, stunted. Kirk will risk his command and risk his ship to free those people, and Picard will risk his command and his ship to make sure that they stay enslaved, because he has this preening moral fig leaf in front of him in the form of the Prime Directive that he tells him is superior. It's not. He's missing something. There's something wrong with him. Anyway, that's that. 3 to go. Brandon Wong says, given the left's war on women hysteria, what is your advice for a male Republican like Rand Paul or Scott Walker running against Hillary without rising the ire of the media or the female demographic? We've got these commercials It's just so tough. We went forever without commercials, and now we're getting commercials back. That's just for those of you watching live on Ustream. I forgot to put the link up on my Facebook page. Oh, well. If you're a YouTube watcher, then you won't mind if I repeat that very quickly. The question was, given the left's war on women hysteria, what's your advice for a male Republican like Rand Paul or Scott Walker running against Hillary without rising the ire of the media or the female demographic? Well, first of all, Brandon, you are going to rise the ire of the media just by being there. You're going to arouse the ire of the media. And Hillary, if she is the nominee, which I think is really open for discussion at this point, will also use the women's angle because Barack Obama was elected president only because the American people felt it was time for a black president. Even this sorry example. They wanted a black president to prove to the world they weren't racist. Hillary's going to play the same strategy. She's going to say virtually verbatim, she's going to come out and say, well, we proved to the world that we're not racist. Now it's your chance to prove that you're not a misogynist or a sexist or a bigot or a chauvinist by voting for the first woman. It's time. It's history's on our side. That's going to be her either spoken or unspoken campaign. And in order to defeat that campaign, as I say again and again and again, you cannot pretend that the moral superiority, the unearned moral superiority, isn't there. You've got to go right at that and attack that immediately because there's nothing else. If you get that out of the way, they've got nothing. So what you do is you go right at that and you say, so your claim to be the president of the United States is not based on competence or record, because we've already seen your record is appalling. Your claim is that you're a woman and it's time for a woman. Aren't you basically saying that you can't compete as an individual? Aren't you basically saying that you are hiding behind your own skirts? Don't dare ask me for my credentials. Don't you dare ask me for my history or my reasons for being president. And don't you dare, by any means, bring up the actual actions I took as third in command. Just understand that I'm too weak to compete on those levels and vote for me because I'm a girl. Is that what you're saying, Madam Clinton? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying. Go right at it. Go right at it. Say, hey, you want to accuse me of misogynist for attacking Hillary Clinton? It's the opposite. The fact that I'm attacking Hillary Clinton on her record is a sign of the fact that I respect her as an individual person. And I'm treating her like an adult, and I'm treating her like an equal, and I'm treating her like she's actually fit. If you're saying that I can't attack her because she's a woman, then what you're really saying is that women can't handle this job. And we need to be nice to them because they're so delicate and dainty and soft and can't handle the emotional strain of give and take. And turn it around and never give up. Never give up. Just go right at that moral superiority. Don't. Anytime she brings up the subject of women and women's rights or women's this or lack of equality or whatever, if she trots out that horrible old thing about 86 women make 78% of what men make, just say, Madam, that's a lie, and you know it's a lie, and I know it's a lie. We both know, and we both know that there's not a chance for the last 20 years, forget the last 5 years or 8 years, not for 20, 30 years, has there been any chance that a woman could do the same job as a man and get less pay. She would have sued her way right to the top of that company. That hasn't been the case in forever, and you know it. The reason men make more money than women is because they work longer hours on more dangerous jobs. But it's got nothing to do with, hey, I'm the human resources manager for the southwestern region of Starbucks, and I get $340,000, but it would only be $260,000 if I was a woman. That just doesn't happen. It hasn't happened in 30 years. 30 years since that kind of a world has existed. And so when you point that out to people, they know it's true. They know it's true. So then you go further and you basically say, so since I know this is true, Mrs. Clinton, and since you know it's true, why are you trotting out this same old tired lie? Is it because you understand that you can't compete? Is it because you understand that your record is so appalling? Is it because you understand that everything you've gotten as a result of being married to Bill Clinton? There's a lot of women out there who have made it on their own, single moms or unmarried women or people who, oh, I don't know, imagine if you're the governor of Alaska, let's say, and you married a guy who's a commercial fisherman in a little boat someplace. Somebody like that actually made it on their own. They didn't marry into power and authority. They fought power and authority their entire lives. I can imagine a woman just like that, as a matter of fact, who's had to raise not just one kid, not just one boutique kid, shared between the nanny and all this. They had to raise 5 kids, including one of them who's got Down syndrome. I can imagine a woman just like that. And I've seen your party destroy that person, destroy them, because they disagreed with their politics. So you don't get to come out and talk about how evil Republicans are in regard to women. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Clinton, the most shameful episode in the history of the Democratic Party prior to the election of Barack Obama was watching all of you feminists swallow your tongues when Bill Clinton, who's a serial predator and by all accounts an actual genuine rapist, continued the kind of boorish, unacceptable, appalling behavior that you've condemned your entire life, but that you tolerated in order to gain additional political power and financial gain. You tolerated all of the stuff that you claim to be about. Bill Clinton is the man that you accuse Mitt Romney of being. Mitt Romney has been married to the same woman for 60 years and had never looked at another skirt. Mitt Romney respects women in a way that your husband can't even imagine. And you demonized him as an anti-woman misogynist when in point of fact, he's hired all of these women at appropriate rates and has done a great job of actively looking for female talent. Never put a hand or a finger on anybody. And you're married to a man who is essentially a serial rapist who's done nothing but take advantage of women who are in positions of virtual slavery to him. You're going to claim you're superior to me morally? No, I don't think so. Not today. This is the kind of thing it's going to take to beat these people. Courage. Just the courage to state the truth and to go on the offensive. And you can say to other women, you can say, hey, if you think, if it's your opinion that you are required to vote for a woman because she's a woman, then you are not a feminist. You're just another member of a tribe. A feminist understands that the world that first wave feminism wanted for and fought for, that anybody with reasonable, decent person would agree with, is that women should be granted the same rights, opportunities, privileges, and pay as men for the same work. So therefore, if you're saying we have to vote for Hillary because she's a woman, that's the exact same thing as saying we can't vote for Hillary because she's a woman. You claim to believe that women can do as well as men. Let's see the proof. Let's see the proof. There are women out there who are certainly qualified to be president and extraordinarily good managers and extraordinarily good executives. And virtually all of them are Republican, and you've demonized every one of them. This person rode her husband's coattails, not just rode his coattails, but rode his coattails and overlooked the things that you are now claiming to be so upset about. You wouldn't be here, we wouldn't know your name if you hadn't put up with the kind of objectification of women on the part of your husband over 4 decades. So you don't get to stand there and claim that we're the people that hate women. You're the person that hates women, Mrs. Clinton. You hate women in the person of Jennifer Flowers, and you hate women in the person of Monica Lewinsky, and you hate all the other women who your husband has abused and who you've covered up for. You're the one. You're the one who thinks that those are not real people, because they can be thrown under the bus as long as you get your power. As long as you get your power. That's what you're in this for. That's why you stayed married to him. Power, oh, let's not forget the money. The money and the power. You swallow your principles every single day for money and power. And I don't. So, if you want to have a debate on the issues, let's have a debate on the issues person to person, adult to adult, individual to individual. But if you're going to hide behind your own skirt, number one, that's not feminism. That's the opposite of feminism. And number two, if you're going to hide behind your own skirt, there's only one person in this world who I don't think has any moral authority to do that, and that's you. That's how I would deal with it. Let's see. Here's an interesting name. Kizk Lind. K-C-Z. Kizk Lind. Forgive me, it's the best I can do. It says, why will the GOP not hold Obama accountable for his continual law-breaking and treasonous actions? Goes on to say, are they afraid of him or do they just not care? Are they of like mind now? No. Let's just stop at the first question mark. Why will the GOP not hold Obama accountable for his continual law-breaking and treasonous actions? Why do you think? I'll just wait. Why do you think Obama's not being held accountable for his actions? Because I came up with a reason instantly, and you did too. And this is why we lose, and this is why all we have to do to not lose is to just speak the truth. And just not be afraid of it. Just not be afraid of it. The reason why the GOP will not hold Obama accountable for his continual law-breaking and treasonous actions is because he's black. Any questions? He's elected because he's black. That's my opinion, but it's also the opinion of liberal saint, oh my gosh, what's her name? Geraldine Ferraro. She said this verbatim just before she died. I believe she was rushed to the grave by the response. Her party, which had held her up as the pinnacle of women, this is before Hillary Clinton reached the scene. She was the first national level female candidate. She was Mondale's running mate in 1984. I thought she was terrific at the time. I don't know much about her. I certainly liked her better than Mondale. And I love her compared to Hillary Clinton. She came out when Obama was about to take the 2008 nomination and said the only reason that this guy is in the race at all is because he's black. He has no credentials. He's not a good politician. He's got nothing going for him. It's because he's black. And she was run out of town on a rail. She was demonized. So we just come out and speak the truth. It's because he's black. If he wasn't, he never would have been the nominee. Everybody knows this, and nobody says it. And nobody says it because they want to be accused of being a racist. My feeling is, me pointing out that he was elected because he's black is evidence of the fact that I'm not a racist. Because if I was a racist, one way or another, if I thought that race was the fundamental defining characteristic of human beings, I wouldn't have said boo about it. I can defend this position, so I'm not afraid of it. And you're not going to beat me up and intimidate me into being quiet. He was elected because he's black. He was elected because the American people had been beaten up and shamed into what their ancestors did. Some of them did. And so it was used to ride him in. They knew it. They were looking for him for years. Jesse Jackson was toted and banged around. Jesse Jackson, by the way, can I just get this said? Jesse Jackson would have been a far better president than Barack Obama and is far more deserving than Barack Obama. And I would have much preferred to see Jesse Jackson as the first black president than Barack Obama, because I despise Jesse Jackson and I think he's a race hustler and so on. But Jesse Jackson is part of the American experience. Jesse Jackson grew up in America as a black man. Jesse Jackson is, in fact, a black American. I would much rather have seen Jesse Jackson be the first black president than Barack Obama. So there you go. That's the reason, and you know it, and I know it, and everybody else knows it. And until we're ready to call it and say what it is, then we won't be winning and we won't be honest. Why do I say that? Why can I say this without worrying about it? It's because when I say that Barack Obama was elected because he's black, liberals say you're a racist. It's just the opposite. Don't you understand? It's just the opposite. What I'm saying is that his incompetence and his inexperience is what I am judging him about, not his skin color. I am looking past his skin to see what the man was and is, and I don't like that. And this ridiculous, absurd criticism that, oh, you would like Obama if he was white. No. Of course I wouldn't. I wouldn't like him more and I wouldn't like him less. If he were white, he'd still be incompetent. He'd still be weak. He'd still be a leftist. He'd still be an idiot. He'd still be a socialist. He'd still be a big state tyrant. He'd still have disregard for the law. It wouldn't change a speck of how I felt about him. It would have made a difference because he wouldn't have been elected if he was white, because America wanted a black president. Any black president would do. And Barack Obama is the evidence of this. And for those of you that were away on the commercial break, I said I would rather see Jesse Jackson have been the first black president than Barack Obama by a country mile. And I despise both of them. But Jesse Jackson grew up in America as a black man. Jesse Jackson earned it. He's completely opposite me in politics. And okay, but he earned it. And I remember his run in 1984. And there's 1,000 candidates better than Jesse Jackson, but at least Jesse Jackson earned it. Alan West earned it, and Ben Carson earned it, and oh my gosh, what's his name? Sometimes I just have such a problem with names. The last election cycle. It'll come to me. Anyway, you get the idea, right? So until we're ready to speak the truth and defend ourselves, then we're going to lose. And it's not just our team that needs to hear the truth. When our team hears somebody speaking the truth, they come out to elections, and when they come out to elections, they win elections. But the other side needs to hear the truth too. They need to hear somebody speaking the truth. They can at least trust that person. They can demonize them and yell and froth at the mouth and all that other stuff, but at least they can say, well, he makes a case. He's got it. He's got a point. He's not afraid. And I think of all the things that I would criticize Mitt Romney for as a candidate, not as a man. I admire him enormously as a man. But as a candidate, I think the things that I would criticize the most about him was this idea that we can't go after these people. The 47% will never get them. Well, you should have had a plan to get them, champ. You should have had a plan to get that 47%. You should have had a plan, Mr. Romney, to get every single vote in America. You should have gotten every vote in America. That should have been your attitude. It's not their fault that they were taken down this road. My view of the 47% of Americans that are dependent on the government that Mitt Romney wrote off is that those people are hostages. They're hostages in a basement. And Herman Cain, thank you. They're hostages in a basement. And somebody's got a gun to their head. They're American citizens. They need to be rescued. They need to be rescued from the slavery that they were put into unwillingly by the Democratic Party. I'd go after every one of them. Every one of them. So, anyway, hopefully that answered your question. And the last question for the night will be from Caleb Belchak. Caleb, I guess, who asks, is America still the strongest nation in the world? If not, who is? If America falls, will another nation rise to take its place? Well, my opinion is, on one level, nations have risen and fallen throughout human history, and so when the big dog goes down, then somebody else gets to be the next big dog. So yes, when America falls, another nation will take its place. That is pretty much inevitable. But there are two operational statements there that are up for argument. One of them is when America falls. You can't deny history. Every great nation has always fallen, and I can't do anything about that. All I can do is make sure it doesn't happen on my watch. All I can do is make sure it doesn't happen today. And so when I think about when is America going to fall, my answer is never. It's never going to fall. Even though on some level I suppose it must. My attitude is not today. And if it's not today, and we can keep growing enough crops of people who feel like it's not today, then she'll be around for a long time. A long time. So the first part of the question is America still the strongest nation in the world? Without question, it is. Without question, it is the strongest nation in the world. And it's the strongest nation in the world with having handcuffed itself and tied itself down to the beach. We drive stakes into the beach every day. We're Gulliver who binds himself. We're the strongest nation in the world by a wide margin as we shackle our feet to the rocks daily. If we would just get out of our own way, watch out. If I was playing Risk or any other game where you had to pick nations, I would pick America first, and I would give up my next 4 choices, or 8. If I had America, I could do anything. Anything. I would take America in a trade. I would take America, and you can have the rest of the choices. I don't care. I would win. Because I'd get out of her way. I'd let her go. I'd let her be free, and I'd let her do what she does best. So America is the strongest nation in the world. Economically, it's still the strongest. Militarily, without question, it's still the strongest. This is why when we bow down before people like Vladimir Putin, makes me weak with anger, because when the British bowed down before Hitler, they had allowed Hitler to become more powerful than they were. Even then, at the time of the French invasion of France, it was more or less equally matched. It's just the Germans believed in themselves and the Western Allies didn't. But for us to be that much stronger than them and to take a knee and bow and get out of their way and ask them not to hurt us, I'd show that man a thing or two. I would show Vladimir Putin a thing or two. I would show him one of the things, I don't know if we were talking about, I guess we talked about this last week. That idea that, that if you're the president of the United States, you should have an attitude such as, my military is run by Curtis LeMay. And Curtis LeMay, as head of the Strategic Air Command, said that peace is our profession, war we just do for kicks. That's the exact posture I would project. And it's not a posture in the sense that a posture might be a bluff. I would want guys who are planning on how they're going to just destroy everything that has a Russian star on it that moves. I want guys that just living for that moment. Let them go. And I want Vladimir Putin to know that I'm just barely hanging on to these people by the skin of my teeth. And man, don't make it impossible for me to hold these people back, rather than this weakness and this, pathetic, my wife doesn't want me talking to this prime minister, so therefore I'm going to move. She's going to take a seat between me and this woman who may have been a prime minister. Maybe he was just having fun flirting with, Barack, you sit over there. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's an utter mystery why he thinks he's got our number. Anyway, Caleb, it is still the strongest nation in the world. If America falls, will another nation rise to take its place? The answer is yes, but the answer is also no. Without question, another nation will rise to take its place. But the fact is, America's unique. It's always been unique. It's unique in that America is the international country. It's the only place in the world that has had a historical size footprint that is made up from people from all the rest of the world. I mean, you think about it, it's absolutely amazing. It's the reason why we have this actual moral authority, genuine moral authority, unlike the pretend kind. It's like, well, what gives you the right to intervene in Cuba? We have a large number of Cuban citizens that are Americans now. We have a large number of Filipino citizens. We have a large number of German citizens and British citizens. It's a nation where people have come from all around the world to come here. This is our home. And we left those countries, and we don't see the thing about America. Ultimately, when you get right down to it, Caleb, the one thing that's unique about America, really, when you get down to the geopolitical force fields and power and all this, get all the ideology, strip all the ideology away. Ultimately, the reason America is different than its predecessors as the dominant world power is the first time in history ever that a country has had the kind of power that we have, where we don't want anything. We don't want anything. The rest of the world can't believe this. They think we're nuts. They think we're lying, but it's true. It's not only we don't need it, we don't want it. Oh, you guys want to take over territory in Russia? Why would we take over territory in GD Russia? Honestly, Russia's a pit. It's filled with alcoholics. You can have the whole damn thing. We live in paradise. We got the run of the place. We got the best land on the board. Oh, your hegemony in South America, you're just looking for territory. Really? Honestly? I just came back from Yosemite National Park and I want a piece of Honduras? Seriously? We live across the hills from Malibu and you're telling me that I want a piece of Zimbabwe? Come on. No. The reason this country is unique as a world power is because it has no territorial designs. When we say we're fighting for people's freedom, we mean it. And this business about a war for oil is like, last time I checked, we're paying for that oil. We're paying for it. We're not taking it. We could. Everybody knows we could, but we don't. We pay for it. We're trading people like the Saudis real money for something that they didn't even know was under their feet and can't get out from under their feet even if they wanted to. Of all the people in the world, I think I have it's hard to find people I have a lower opinion of than the Saudis. There may be one or two, but they are right down at the bottom of the list of people. They can't. Look, the best thing I ever heard about Saudi Arabia was I talked to an engineer who was in. There it goes again. There goes the brain. Kuwait, and he said he was in Kuwait for 3 years and saw Saudis every day, lots and lots and lots of them. He said he never saw a Saudi man lift anything heavier than his wallet. Yep, that's it. They can't get the oil. They can't go for it. They can't maintain it. They can't build the cars. They can't design their buildings. All of those buildings in Dubai and all these other things are all Western architects and Western engineers and Western this. We are paying them real money to pull this valuable stuff out from under the sand. And if we wanted to take it, we could. But we don't. That's never happened. And I think by now you probably have gotten a sense of my admiration for the British Empire and for their sense of fair play and decency and law. But the actual honest-to-God fact is the British Empire did, in fact, pull resources, suck resources out from the world, took the wealth of India and the wealth of everywhere else there was, and shipped it back home to Great Britain. We do exactly the opposite. We pay for this stuff more than it costs. We push money and wealth out into the world. We push wealth into the world. China's a rich country now because we're paying the Chinese for the stuff that they're making. And ditto for India. All these call centers that are so frustrating. You know, you call American Airlines and you want to book your reservation change, and they say, "Can I get your name, please?" And it's like, "Bill." And they say, "Could you spell that?" Sure, I could spell it. Could you spell Bill? Absolutely. B-I-L-L. These Indian call centers are making India, among all the other things in India, making India a rich country because we're paying them. We're not doing what the British did to India, taking the resources out of there. The British gave them something in exchange for what they took out of there. Whether or not it was a good deal is up for discussion. But we pay. We pay them. When we have a military base in the Philippines, we pay them hundreds of millions of dollars a year for that base. And when the Philippine people decide in a not large enough number to vote against it, we don't want you here anymore, sayonara. Here you go. You can have the base. You can have it. What are we going to do, take it with us? Some people would have, some people would have blown those bases up. There are people, and I bet the Russians are one of them and the Chinese are another, who, when they'd been asked to leave Subic Bay or Clark Air Force Base, would have simply torn up the runways and said, "Okay, here's your land the way we found it." We don't do that. So while some other nation will someday rise to take our place, no one's going to take our place in terms of what we are to the world. That's never going to happen again. It can't happen again. Not here. Not on this planet. So that's that. So I love this country. And that's why I fight for her. Because she's marvelous and unique and good and awesome and fun and cool. All the things I like. And so closes Stratosphere Lounge episode 72. A mere 1 hour and 43 minutes. An evening of piker, just a whiff, a sneeze in the grand scheme of things. Thanks again for coming and joining us, as always. We'll get this one up online as quickly as we can. I think we called the last one episode 72, but it was 71. This is 72. We're back in the game again. Hopefully I'll get a little rest. You will see a significant difference within about 3 to 4 weeks after I move into the new office space. By that time, 3 or 4 weeks after we're in, the consequences of having the office space will start to make itself apparent. Until then, we'll keep spinning our wheels and just trying to keep the main product going out the door. But when we get into the place and we're settled 2 weeks after that, you'll start to see some real improvements. So if you can hang on long enough, hopefully that'll be great. And among those other things that are coming are some movies, and that's actually going to happen. So anyway, that's about it. Episode 72 of the Stratosphere Lounge. As always, thank you again for everything. Thank you again for your kindness and your support. And for those of you that are members at BillWhittle.com, thank you for your cash donations and your belief in what we're doing. And I suppose we will see you next week. So you all take care of yourselves out there, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.